And welcome back to the MovieBabble Podcast. This is Nick Kush, and I am joined by, nobody today. We're doing something a little different, because we have some really cool things coming down the pipe this week. If you don't know, myself and Colin, who you normally hear on the podcast, will be going to the Sundance Film Festival. Really cool stuff, and so we're really just busy, just working our little hearts out to get ready for that later this week. I'm very excited. This is my second time. I went last year, and I just can't wait. I'm basically in heaven when I'm there. I think I saw 18 movies in 6 days, something like that. By the third day, I'm working on about 3 cups of coffee a day at least. I'm happy to get 6 hours of sleep, maybe. The last day I was there, I think I saw 4 movies in the entire day, which ended with a midnight screening of The Nightingale, which, if you've seen The Nightingale, that's kind of a bummer movie to end the night on. And also, it's also 2 hours and 15 minutes, something like that, so you get out of there at 2:30, 2:45, or in the dead of winter in Park City, Utah. It's really fucking cold outside. You're just miserable, and then you wake up, and then the next morning I went to an 8:30 screening of Brittany Runs a Marathon, so I had about 4 hours of sleep, 5 hours, something like that, once I finally got back to the old shack. But it was quite a whirlwind experience, but I really can't wait. We're looking forward to seeing some of the panels and basically everything that Sundance has. I drink the Kool-Aid hard. There's a saying about people being really high on the altitude out there, and I could definitely feel that last time, so hopefully Colin learns from my stupidity and can kind of judge things a little better than me. But since we're doing solo today, let's just jump right into it here. So breaking down the top 5 at the box office, we had a surprise one for me, Bad Boys for Life, with $62 million over the weekend, and as we go down here, we'll go through the weekend totals, and then we'll break down the Martin Luther King extended weekend totals as we get to movie. But second coming in over the weekend was 1917 with $22 million. Then actually flipped with the third film on this list, which was Dolittle, which had $21.95 million for the weekend. Those two movies flipped, actually, when you factor in the MLK totals. Then after that, at fourth, we had Jumanji: The Next Level, which has just kind of been chilling in the top 5 for quite a few weeks now. A really solid drop in this latest week. And then we have Rise of Skywalker at 5, just chilling there. So yeah, really interesting week for me personally. I was not seeing Bad Boys for Life coming on this one. I knew people really loved 1 and 2, and it's kind of one of our big nostalgia points, I feel like, that hasn't been mined quite yet. But I just was really not seeing this kind of massive haul for it. So it took in about $73.4 million over the MLK weekend, which is kind of crazy. So this movie, when I saw it was budgeted around $90 million, I was really, really nervous. This seemed like kind of like a January write-off stinker, maybe makes its budget back overall, and it's kind of just a tax write-off for Sony. But I guess I was just an idiot, because this movie did incredibly well. And it is really interesting because this movie did really well. Cinema score, Rotten Tomatoes audience score is really, really great. And I guess it just shows that how much people love the first 2 Bad Boys movies, which is really interesting for me. So leading up to the release of Bad Boys for Life, I had never seen a Bad Boys movie. So I had to kind of just see what everyone was into with these 2 movies. And I can certainly see why people love them, because it's probably Will Smith at his most Will Smith, if that makes sense. He's just Will Smith, the outgoing personality you love, times like cocaine and just all these whatever drugs Michael Bay was feeding him on set of those 2 movies. It's just him going balls to the wall, and Martin Lawrence is a really good foil for him. They're just going back and forth. Just the amount of times where they're just yelling in cars and yelling fuck at each other, or just insults. They're just rattling off really quick just jabs at each other, and I think people really took to that, and I think it's one of the things that Bad Boys for Life does really well, when we get to that one in a second. But yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit there's this nostalgia goggles for the first movie, because that movie's just not good, and Bad Boys 2 is just a cocaine, I can't tell if it's a nightmare or a fever dream or something. But yeah, the first one is I mean, it's kind of weird. If you haven't seen it in a while, it's just a very weird mistaken identity kind of comedy turned into this kind of crime caper. So Martin Lawrence and Will Smith kind of they take in a witness to a murder played by Taya Leone, and she only trusts apparently the cop who is supposed to be Will Smith, but shenanigans ensue, and Martin Lawrence has to act as the Will Smith character and vice versa. So there's just this really weird kind of playing against type thing throughout the entire movie, which it really didn't have to happen, like, ever. It's just a really kind of confounding plot, and then explosions happen in typical Michael Bay fashion, and then the movie's over. But I think Bad Boys 2 is the movie that we kind of have all the love for, because it's just insane, and it's everything that you liked in the first Bad Boys, and just kind of just ramped up to an incredible degree. It is, I think I said this when I first saw it, it's probably the best bad movie, maybe of the last 20 years. It is so entertaining to watch, but also just so terrible. It's all of the bad things about Michael Bay, just the obnoxious attempts at humor, but it's also some of the really good stuff. Like, I think one of the biggest detriments to Michael Bay's career is the advancements in CGI, because just we get to like Transformers: The Last Knight, and the movies. Well, first of all, it's just not good, but it's just all the action sequences are so incoherent. They're just really, really bad. You have no idea what's happening. You don't know what Transformer is a Decepticon or an Autobot. There's just kind of just metal flying all over the screen. You have no idea what's happening. But I feel like back when Bad Boys 2 came out, back in I think it was in the mid-90s, but he was kind of constrained by practical effects. So instead of all these crazy stunts that defy physics in all senses, he's just kind of just going balls to the wall with what he's got. So I think one of my favorite scenes in that movie, I think it's the favorite scene for a lot of people, is just that crazy, like, feels like a 45-minute long freeway chase. The Bad Boys are just in a Porsche, just going all around cars and looking really cool and really fast, and the bad guys are driving 18-wheeler with just cars latched onto it, and they keep displacing them. They keep flying all over the freeway, and it's really kinetic, and you understand what's happening, even though if it's just the most absurd thing ever. So it's really entertaining. And then it's just the back and forth between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in that movie is just kind of insane. And I think if it was literally any other pair of actors, it would probably be unwatchable for me. And I know it's probably unwatchable to a lot of people because critics hate this movie. You look at the Rotten Tomato score, it's not great, somewhere in the 20s. But there's just something about it. It's really kinetically paced, and things don't really make sense if you kind of break down the plot. But it's one of those movies where things are coming by you at such a fast and just abrasive speed that you just don't really have time to think about it. It's in the movie when a movie starts out with a group of Navy SEALs kind of just converging on a KKK group who are burning a cross, and then there's a young Michael Shannon makes a cameo in there, and then it's just insane. It goes from there. It's all the things Michael Bay, jingoistic stuff, love for armed forces, and then by the end of it, we get down to a show off in Guantanamo Bay, and Johnny Tapia just gets his brains blown out. That movie is just insane. So when we get to Bad Boys for Life, it's really interesting to look at those first two and then kind of see what this movie is, because I think it's the best movie out of the three. It's actually really funny when I went and saw this movie, and it actually kind of functioned as a movie with story progression and character arcs, and it kind of took me back a little bit because I was just not expecting that at all. And I was actually expecting this movie to be one of those just delayed sequels that are just really terrible and just kind of sad to watch, just because the people are old, they don't quite have that fastball that they used to have. But what I really appreciate about Bad Boys for Life is that it's all about that. So this movie is there's a really good and really interesting meta-contextual conversation going on in this movie, just about how obnoxious they were in the previous two movies. And Martin Lawrence, he has kind of these funny bits where he's said he's found God and he's not going to bring more violence into the world. And this movie is just kind of all about growing up and realizing that they're not those cocky kids anymore. So they need to they need to have some more reservations behind what they're saying, what they're doing, and they don't move quite as well as they used to. It's really funny, and I really like it. It works really well. And there's one really good scene, which has actually been playing in some of the promotional material for this movie, where Will Smith meets the group known as Ammo, which is kind of the Miami like special police unit, which has Vanessa Hudgens is in it, and Charles Melton and Alexander Ludwig. And as soon as Will Smith comes in the door, Charles Melton just immediately starts busting his balls. And Will Smith says, "Oh, you're that guy." And then Melton comes back and says, "Yep, there's always one," which is really funny in context. It seems like it'd be kind of stupid, but it works really nicely. And so yeah, this movie just kind of knows the tropes of the genre it's playing in, and it plays off them really well. And I think this movie definitely does fall back into kind of the tired, like delayed sequel plot devices or revelations. And I won't spoil them for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, but you have a bunch of that stuff in there. And yeah, I think the tone of this movie doesn't work particularly well in times. I think it's weird because this movie plays a lot of moments very seriously. So there's some times where the death and violence is really supposed to hit you in some way, and then it's followed directly after by some kind of death or mutilation or something that's supposed to be played for laughs. And sometimes it doesn't quite get that tone right. But I was really surprised about this movie. I think it works surprisingly well. Is it going to win any awards? No, but right now it's maybe my favorite movie of the year. I mean, that's not really saying much, but the fact that this movie works is really amazing to me. So yeah, we'll get into the sort of the financial side of this as well. So, $90 million budget, as I said before. The movie's already made $112 million worldwide. So, just really good on this movie. It seems like it's just an unmitigated success for Sony, who was, I've kind of been shitting on them for a while. They're just doing really well. And so it's kind of good to see them. They're in the upswing, definitely, and we'll talk about Jumanji in a second. But they've just had a really good stretch here. And Bad Boys for Life was the second largest Martin Luther King weekend gross ever, right behind American Sniper, which is just bizarre. What a weird time 2014 was. But yeah, a $90 million R-rated action movie just really doesn't work. You don't see that a lot anymore. So to see this movie be successful is really, really interesting. So just good on everyone involved in this, and a couple screenwriters, a dual directing team. I'm really excited to see what they do next, because this movie does a really good job of having a lot of reverence for the first two movies, but then also doing its own thing, which I think is the best way to please fans. Does it necessarily bring about the best movie? No, but this movie just works, and I think that in and of itself is just one of the more amazing things that I'll see this year. I say that in January now. Come back to me in like April when actual movies happen. But yeah, really good for Bad Boys for Life. You really can't say anything negative about it. It's just success, and Cinema Score really seems like it'll have a really solid second week. So we'll see. I think 300, 400 million, not out of the question for this movie. Who knows? I thought this movie was going to flop miserably. So maybe take my expectations there with a massive grain of salt. But yeah, it's just doing really well. And so I guess from there, we're going to go in order by the weekend releases here. And so the next is 1917, which is just doing really well. Once again, this movie is just, it seems like it's emerging as the Best Picture favorite with its win at the Producers Guild Awards and just about every other awards body. It's just really cleaning up, and I kind of know that I've discussed my displeasure for this film a bunch of times, but it's striking a chord with a ton of people, and it's doing really well. So yeah, that $90 million budget, I know we kind of had a little bit of, we had trepidations about that at the beginning. We were a little worried if that might have been too much, but now that 1917 is getting all these awards consideration, all these wins and whatnot, that budget's not going to really be much of an issue. And it's already made $143 million worldwide. So with kind of the praise it's getting, and maybe it wins Best Picture, you're going to see this movie in theaters for a really, really long time. So when it's all said and done, I wouldn't be surprised with something north of 300 million worldwide, maybe close to 400 million if it wins Best Picture. I think this movie is it's one of those things where it's just forthrightly very inoffensive. It's a war movie with nothing really on its mind, which kind of bothered me. But to a lot of people, they're going to just sit back and let all the visuals and all the athletic filmmaking just wash over them. And I think they're going to go back and see it multiple times in theaters, because it's definitely a movie that kind of lends itself to just IMAX and seeing it on the biggest screen possible. And maybe you have one of those theaters with the rumbling seats, which would probably be really good for this. Like I said, I think this movie sucks, but clearly you don't. It's doing really well. It made $26.8 million over the 4-day, or I guess the 3-day weekend with Martin Luther King. So it's just going along, and we're going to kind of touch base with a couple other movies that were nominated for Best Picture. But yeah, solid week-to-week drops. It's going to hang around really nicely, as a lot of Best Picture nominees do. So you're probably going to see this movie hang around in the top 5, maybe 4 or 5 range, or maybe just outside of that for a really long time, get these $8 to $9 million grosses over and over again, and just keep peppering away until we kind of look back at all the numbers and say, whoa, this movie really jumped up there. So I'm going to be really tired of talking about this movie. So we will move on to a much more interesting failure, which is Dolittle. In my notes here for Dolittle, my first note is oof, which, yeah, Dolittle is, by all intents and purposes, a catastrophe. So it made $21.95 million over the weekend. And it actually, like I said earlier, it flipped with 1917 and got the second spot in the top 5 over the entire Martin Luther King holiday weekend. It ended up getting $29.5 million. So, and surprisingly, it did better than expectations. People were expecting this to be a little lower than that, but it got over that. I mean, that's probably a serious consolation prize for this movie, because it cost $175 million. I know you've probably been hearing this from other places. This is just a really big disaster for Universal. And so this movie was supposed to come out, I think it was maybe a holiday release, or I can't even remember, maybe it was a summer release, but it's been pushed back a lot. That's because I had a lot of reshoots, and it was just not coming together. So the original director on this movie was Stephen Gaghan, who directed things like Sirana and worked on Traffic. And so I don't really know why you bring him on to do Dolittle, because when I think of kids like friendly entertainment, I think of the guy who did Syriana, which is one of the most self-serious movies. So probably not a good job by Universal there. But yeah, it seems like it's tough to say with not being there on set as well, but all the reports say it seemed like he was kind of out of his element, just kind of over his head. And so just the movie just was not cutting together. So they had really extensive reshoots that took a really long time. They brought in Jonathan Liebesman to work to be the director for these reshoots, and they brought in Chris McKay, who worked on the Lego Batman movie, to kind of punch up the script. So I think reshoots went on for a couple weeks, maybe over a month, which is just not good. If all these big movies do reshoots in some sense, but when you're getting into lengths of that long, it's not great at all. So yeah, they brought Jonathan Liebesman, has worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and kind of things that are probably closer to the tone that Dolittle was probably shooting for in the first place. But it didn't really seem that helped it. This movie, I haven't had a chance to see it. I was really putting it off because I just don't want to. Because you hear about these things for months and months and just how terrible they look, and then the trailer comes out, and sometimes I guess the downside of being a critic sometimes is there's just movies you just know are going to be terrible, and you just kind of have to psych yourself up to even drive out and see them if you don't get into a press screening. So I'll see this at some point. I really don't want to, but it's really interesting to just kind of go through the cast of this movie. So we have RDJ as Dolittle, and then the voice and the rest of the cast, including the voices in this movie, is kind of unprecedented. So you have Antonio Banderas, you have Michael Sheen, who plays the villain, you have Jim Broadbent, Jesse Buckley, Emma Thompson, and then you have Rami Malek, John Cena, Kumail Nanjiani, Octavia Spencer, Tom Holland, Craig Robinson, Ray Fiennes, Selena Gomez, Marion Cotillard, and you have Jason Mantzoukas in there as well. Like, this cast is crazy. It has just about everyone in it, and I wonder if this movie just maybe did decently because it had so many social media influencers working on it, and Universal was like, hey, can you just send out a quick tweet telling people to see this movie or whatever, or share the trailer? And they were like, fine, and I'll get my publicist or social media guy on it. So maybe people saw it more because of that. I don't really know. Point is, this movie is tanking really, really hard. So overall, it made 29.5 here in the States, added another 27.3 internationally, so it's sitting at right under 57 million worldwide. So that's not good. That's not what you want. It's not a good plan. It needs a lot of work to do here. I don't really see this movie even getting close to its budget. I'd say anything above 100 million is probably what Universal is hoping for at this point. Then they'll use it as a big tax write-off for things later down the road. And yeah, this is just an all-timer of just a big budget movie that was supposed to be a holiday something or summer something, and then it just turned into a big bunch of nothing. So yeah, sorry for Dolittle. We hardly knew ye. I imagine it seems like people are jumping on this movie a lot. Maybe I see it and it's one of the worst movies of the year. I'm not looking forward to it. So we shall see. But until that time, we'll move on to Jumanji: The Next Level, which just continues to do really, really good business. As I kind of mentioned with 1917, it is kind of in that mode now where it's just kind of peppering these below $10 million grosses every week. It's dropping really nicely. So over the weekend, it made a little under 10 million. Jumanji did, and had about a 31% drop. So we've kind of been seeing this for the last couple of weeks with Jumanji. It's just doing great, and it's a nice fluffy comedy. It's perfect around the holidays. It's one of those movies that it's a 4-quadrant movie, but it actually kind of succeeds in doing all those things that a 4-quadrant movie sets out to do. I think we see a lot of these movies that come out and they try to appeal to everybody, but by doing so they appeal to no one. But Jumanji, I feel like, was one of those movies that actually worked. Was it great? No. Nowhere close to my favorites of last year. I cheated on my top 10 of the year list and put about 40 to 50 movies on there, and this was not even in consideration there. But it's fine, and it works on a very superficial level. It's a lot of celebrities you like being really funny, so that's great. So the interesting thing here is that it's crossed 700 million worldwide. It's sitting at 712. So even though I'm still skeptical that I won't reach the crazy heights of the first Jumanji movie, which made just under $1 billion worldwide, this movie's creeping up there. I foresee maybe something around 800 million for this movie, which is just awesome news for Sony. And I can't believe I'm saying that Sony's winning this week, but they're doing great. We're still waiting on that third movie announcement, which I imagine is coming soon. I feel like we kind of talk about this in every pod because we just have really nothing else to say about Jumanji at this point except that it's doing really well. So yeah, it's just doing good business, and that's all it is. Good job, Jumanji. And so to round out the top 5, one that we've kind of talked to death here, and frankly, I don't really want to talk about it because it sucks. That's The Rise of Skywalker. It's also in that mode where it's just kind of peppering in those sub $10 million grosses every week. So The Rise of Skywalker crossed $1 billion at the worldwide box office this week, and it's really interesting to see how this movie's crossed $1 billion, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, cool." It's still kind of a disappointment, which is really interesting. I mean, regardless of what you say about the movie, it's just fascinating that we're in a time where a movie crosses $1 billion, and we're like, "Ooh, I don't really know about this one. Like, what's wrong? Like, is this franchise in danger?" Just really interesting, kind of at a super high level. I know all those issues are probably well-reasoned, well-intentioned, all the reasons things that we don't like Star Wars and why we all want them to take a break. I know, I certainly do. I don't want to see another Star Wars movie on the big screen for at least a decade. We'll see if that actually happens. But yeah, it's 15th all-time, the domestic box office. It's doing fine. Disney's doing okay. No one really likes this movie as far as I can tell. At least anyone that I talk to. But hey, it's making money. That's all you can care about. So yeah, that kind of wraps up the top 5 for this week. So I wanted to actually check in with a few movies that we haven't discussed either in a while or much at all on the pod, and because I think it's really interesting to see kind of what they've been doing. And these two movies are Little Women and Knives Out, and they've both been these movies where they haven't been in the top 5 for quite some time, or at least we haven't really talked much about them, but they're they're just in this mode where people really like them. They're dropping really solidly week to week, and they're just padding out their domestic gross and their time in theaters, and they're just doing really good business. So Little Women over the weekend, $6.3 million, 18.6% drop, which is just really terrific for this movie. It's well over 100 million worldwide, sitting at a little over 130 million, 84 million here in the States. So we can expect that you can expect it to cross 100 million pretty soon. And then Knives Out is just a really big winner of the holiday season. It's sitting right around 278 million worldwide. With the Rian Johnson bump off of his Best Original Screenplay nom, you can expect probably this movie to just hang around for even longer than it would have otherwise. So yeah, 300 million is definitely within the realm of possibility here. So it's cool, and both these movies cost $440 million. So to see both of them succeed, I feel like I'm always the one who's just kind of bemoaning the death of the mid-budget movie on this podcast, and we see decent movies that are kind of in that happy range where they have enough money to have stars and have some type of scope, but not crazy money like Star Wars. We kind of seen a lot of them not do well, but in this case, Knives Out, Little Women, they're doing incredible, and I think that kind of just speaks to how these movies are just really good. People love them. They're crowd pleasers in a sense, but they're also challenging and have a lot of interesting things to say. I love Little Women. It's one of my favorite movies of last year. I also love Knives Out. It's not in my top 10, but one of my honorable mentions, absolutely. So really good to see this, and I know Lionsgate's really happy with this one. Between Knives Out and John Wick 3, Lionsgate had a really good 2019. We'll forget about Hellboy and put it in the corner when we had that discussion. But Knives Out, John Wick 3, really good stuff by Lionsgate. Yeah, and both those movies are they're really not quite succeeding because of solely it, but Little Women and Knives Out are definitely getting a little bit of an Oscars bump with the nominations coming out and people kind of going to the theaters, and they're adding theaters or just staying in theaters. And we're gonna kind of look into a couple other movies here that are kind of seeing the same benefits here. So you see this every year where movies get nominated for Best Picture, then they come back into theaters or just stay in theaters longer. People got to see them, and you have chains like AMC and Regal who put them out as like some special expose where they show all 9 or 10 or 8 Best Picture nominees, and you can see all of them when the weekly pass and all that. So we're in that time now. So you're going to start to see a lot of these movies do really well and reappear on box office reports, which is cool for some of them, because movies like Parasite, which is kind of the first one on my list here, it went up about 80% this week, added a bunch of theaters. It's now back in 843 theaters here in the States. It's really cool to see this movie fresh off its SAG win for Best Ensemble, just really doing well. And it's really interesting because this movie was already a huge success before it got to the States because it made so much money overseas. And this movie cost about $11 million, and it's made $139 million. So that's just really good stuff, and 28 of that is in the U.S. So basically anything it makes here is kind of just gravy. So for that to get a little bump based off the nominee is just really good for that movie, and I'm really happy that Parasite's going to be a lot of new people that would never have seen it are going to go out and see it and check it out. It's really cool. Not one of my favorites of the year. It's just underneath my top 10 of the year for reasons that I can't really explain because I would spoil the movie. Maybe at some point in the near future I'll get into that. But really solid movie, and it's really cool to see this movie do well. And it takes us to the next one, which is Jojo Rabbit, and of all the Best Picture nominees, this movie probably needed the bump the most, which is really interesting because I think back in September when this movie premiered at TIFF and it won the Audience Award, I think I talked to Brendan and we could kind of both sense that the avalanche of Jojo Rabbit love was coming. And a lot of people thought this was probably your frontrunner for Best Picture, and it just didn't quite burst out like a lot of pundits expected. It's doing fine, so it's made a little over 40 million worldwide, about 44. It's made about 24 here in the States, but definitely not the crazy success that maybe Fox Searchlight was or I guess Searchlight Pictures at this point. Jesus, Disney doing shit. But yeah, it's not quite the big breakout hit that a lot of people were expecting. I think I expected it to maybe even get north of 100 million here in the States. Just its wacky premise, and I think this movie's a bit of a crowd pleaser, obviously, because it won the fan award at TIFF. You would expect a lot of people to seek this movie out, and the word of mouth to kind of build until a bunch of nominees came through, and it got a few nominees: screenplay in there, production design, costume, and all that stuff. But it doesn't really feel like the front runner for any of these movies. It feels kind of like this year's Vice, where Vice was nominated for a bunch of stuff, but it didn't really win anything. It felt like everyone was like, all right, we'll just give this last nomination to Vice just because. And it kind of feels like where Jojo Rabbit is, so I don't really see. I think it's going to be one of those movies that doesn't really win anything at the Academy Awards. It would be one of the big losers of the night. Yeah, it really needed this bump. So it's up 625% this week. So it's doing pretty decently, and it needs every bit it can get. It's certainly not a disaster or anything. It's probably made money for Fox Searchlight at this point, but I know they were probably hoping for more. So we'll stay tuned on that one and maybe check in later dates. But another movie that really benefited from that Best Picture nominee was Ford v Ferrari, which I know we've been kind of just tracking and kind of checking in with quite often on this podcast, just because that budget just been really high, $97 million budget. And I think all of us, Colin, Brennan, and I, were all kind of worried about what this movie would end up doing, because it's pretty good. I like this movie a lot. I watched it again for a second time, and I thought it was better the second time around. I don't think it's quite like a hollow bro dad movie that a lot of pundits out there think. I think there's a little more about the creative experience and kind of working within constraints that I think works really well for any kind of movie of this size, and the fact that we don't get a sort of big budget prestige movie like this very often, I think it makes those themes even stronger on rewatches. But this movie's made $216 million worldwide at this point on a, like I said, $97 million budget. So it's tough to say if this movie is profitable or not at this point. I would lean towards no. I mean, it just really depends on what the marketing and promotion is. But generally, as I've mentioned many times in this scene, you want to make about 2.5 times the production budget, or even up to 3 times with movies like this to get a profit. So for judging by that, we're looking at somewhere between 250 to 300 million necessary for Ford v Ferrari. Ooh, if I can talk. Talking to yourself for a while, you get a little tongue-tied, Jesus. But we're looking at that kind of number for Ford v Ferrari to be successful in my mind. So yeah, Best Picture nominee is really big for this movie to kind of just stay in theaters for a while. Do I see it reaching that threshold? No, but every dollar really helps in this situation, and I'm rooting for it, because Ford v Ferrari is a movie that I quite enjoy, and I hope people and all the dads wearing their New Balances go check it out, because I think they'll find something good in it. And the last movie here, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is already done really well. $90 million budget, $373 million worldwide. So I would expect probably for this one, when it comes back into theaters, this is a movie that people will be seeing maybe for their second or third time, maybe somewhere in there. So it was only in about 50 theaters before this weekend, but it jumped back up to 700 after its Best Picture nominee. I know Sony, another Sony win. Jesus, good on them. Jesus, maybe I need to rethink my calculus on that one, but they've really been playing a long game on this one, where we knew for a while that they were going to put this movie back in theaters around this time, and it was, the marketing has been all over the place, where there was the DVD release was also before this date as well, so we've kind of just been inundated with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood stuff since it released back in the summer. So this movie doesn't really need a bump in theaters, but it doesn't really hurt, right? So it's doing really well. And with that about wraps it up for this week. So thank you all so much for listening and bearing with me on the solo pod as I ventured into the unknown. My guess is that we are probably not going to be here next week for a pod. Colin and I are going to probably just be exhausted by the time next weekend comes around and it's time to record and look at the box office results. So we'll be back in probably 2 weeks on that front. We'll also be kind of summing up our experiences at Sundance in a podcast as well. And as always, you can check out all the content that we have on the site. We're all working tirelessly to put out good stuff for you. So you head over to MovieBabbleReviews.com and check us out there, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and anywhere else. You can find us, YouTube, Pinterest. I don't really know. Just find us, search MovieBabble, you'll find us. But thank you all so much for listening, and until next time, thank you very much.